Do you ever walk out of the house, someone recognizes you and like spits on you or anything like that?
Let me tell you what does happen. I do a lot of work at Starbucks because I just like the atmosphere for work. And on a regular basis, maybe once a week, somebody approaches me at the table and usually bends down. It's often a man and says, excuse me. Are you Scott Adams? I won't know which way this is going yet. Like this could go terribly wrong. And I'll be, yeah. And then the person will say, big fans, glad, we've been following you forever. Keep up the good work. Yeah. Don't worry about the cancellation. And then they go away like that. My experience is that I turned into a superstar in ways I've never experienced before. I've been famous for 25 years and people love Dilbert, but there's a level of appreciation for not letting the machine kill me, just surviving and surviving with a smile that people really respond to because everybody feels the machine is pressing them too.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
So I want to, I haven't really been on social media much in the past couple of years. I got a little burnt out when, unlike you, I had some criticism and it just got too much for me and I just kind of took off. But, obviously we've known each other a long time. I really love all your books. I love Dilbert. I've really loved all our conversations. And we booked this podcast and someone mentioned to me, and you've mentioned it several times on the podcast, oh, didn't Scott Adams get canceled? And I'm like, well, I don't care because I know Scott and we've always been good to each other. I'm going to be good to him. I want him on my podcast. I want to hear about this book. And, so what was it that, I mean, I know now, but like describe what was it that got you canceled? Because I looked into it. It doesn't seem like you should. It seemed like they were looking for an excuse to cancel you. They found one and it stuck.
Yeah.
And so they got you.
Yeah, it wasn't the first attempt. It was just the first successful attempt. So here's what your viewers need to know as context. Number one, there's no such thing as news about public figures that's true. Like if you don't,
That's very true.
If you don't understand the basic that no news about public figures is ever true, then it gets confusing fast. Now, when I say it's not true, it's not that I didn't say exactly what I was quoted as saying. That did happen. Well, a lot of the biggest hoaxes in the world happen when the video shows somebody doing exactly what they did, but some context was left out that completely changes what you think about it. So that's the first.
And let me just add to that real quickly, which is that I'm by far not as public a figure as you, but every single time anybody has ever 100% of the time ever written any kind of newspaper article about me or anything, there's always been complete lies and untruths in it. And so I always imagine if that happens to, I'm not the only one that 100% of the time people write lies about. It must happen to everybody. And I've heard that from other public figures that every single article ever written about them contains lies. So people, I agree. You should never, that's why I never read the newspaper. I never watch the news because it's 100% there are lies in every news article.
And look at the biography of Elon Musk. You've got one of the most respected biographers, Walter Isaacson, who got one fact wrong, which he now admits, that he got it wrong, which changed Elon Musk from somebody who might have been preventing a nuclear war to somebody who's a traitor to his country because of one fact they got wrong about, were his satellites already on or not, and who asked him. Turns out it was the Ukrainians who asked him to turn them on. But he said, if the president of the United States had asked me, I would have turned them on. But I don't work for Ukraine. And,
right.
So, but if that story was just a little bit different, it changed him from saving the world to being, one of the worst traitors you've ever heard of. So just understand for the viewers, because you already understand, that that's more normal than not normal. So now, second thing you need to know is that everything I said, I did say. And I said that some version of white people should move away from black people. Now, the second thing you should know is that's obvious hyperbole, because how would you even do that? I'm not suggesting, Jim Crow laws or, going back to the past. There's no practical way to do that. So I was being intentionally provocative to try to draw as much attention to myself as I could so that I could do a reframe. because I was planning to do it as part of the launch of the book before it got canceled. We had a different launch date. And I thought, I'm going to really make some noise here. I'm going to get people really mad. Then they'll come to me and I'll reframe it. And I'll tell you what the reframe is in a minute. Because it's the biggest problem in the world or America. And I think I can make a difference. But I'm going to have to get everybody really mad before I do it. So I started riffing off a Rasmussen poll that showed that Black Americans had a negative thought about being white. Now, without defending the accuracy of the poll, because it really didn't matter to my point, I was just using it as a launch pad, because the point still stands without the poll. So we can forget the poll. That was just an opportunistic way to introduce the topic. Here's the big picture. In the current world, we've got ESG, CRT, and DEI. Most of your viewers are familiar with at least a few of those, but they all have the same common.
What's DEI? I don't know DEI.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think.
Okay.
So corporations have DEI managers who make sure that the hiring and everything reaches equity. ESG is environmental, social, and governance, which tries to make sure that your company is promoting and being led by something representative of the public demographic. So that also has to do with race and gender. And then CRT is the more academic version that has also has a common element with the other two, that there's an oppressed class, Black Americans, and there's an oppressor class that, although slavery is gone and Jim Crow is gone, the legacy and let's say the ripple effect, the systemic racism still exists. And so we still have an oppressed class and oppressor class. And my point is this: if you're in this situation where you're identified by every element of society, from the World Economic Forum with ESG to every corporation with DEI, they almost all have DEI managers now, to academia, how do you say academia? With CRT, you've thoroughly saturated the culture with the idea that one group is oppressed and the other group has their stuff and needs to give it back. And under those conditions, if you're the one that's labeled as the oppressor, you should get out of that situation. That's a dangerous situation to be in. I use the example of I've lost 2 corporate jobs and a TV show because I was a white man. And I'm not guessing. I was told that directly in each case. In my banking job, my boss, who was white, said, we don't have enough diversity. We're getting a lot of pressure from the outside. Newspapers are on us, so we can't promote you. And I said, for how long? Like, well, there's no end date. It's going to take a long time to correct this. So I left. I quit. And being a white man in America, I had lots of options. So I just quit, got another job, went to the phone company, got on their leadership training program. So I was going to be have a rocket strapped to my ass, as they used to say. That was the saying. Yeah, he had a rocket strapped to his ass. And one day my boss called me in and said, same speech. And not, again, white boss, said, I don't know how to tell you this, but the word has come down, no promotions for white men, because we got to get some diversity going in senior management. And so that's when I started the Dilbert comic. I'm part-time. I was like, well, I guess my corporate career isn't going to work out. So then Dilbert took off. I left my corporate career and I started a animated version on the UPN. After it was successful the first season, it got renewed, but it got renewed at a time when UPN decided to make a comedy block on Monday night. There was only African-American, designed and focused shows. Now, Dilbert didn't fit in that, so I lost my time slot. And anybody who knows TV knows that when you lose your time slot, you lose your momentum. And TV shows are either going up or down. Ours went down when it changed. It was going up when people could find it. It went down when it moved. And that was the end of it. When I got canceled, more recently, when my comic was removed from all newspapers in the world and my books were removed, all of them, from every shelf in the world, at least in terms of cancellation, I asked myself, would a Black American have been canceled for saying exactly what I said? And I think everybody would agree. No, absolutely not. And in fact, would a Democrat have been canceled for saying what I said? Now, that's a little closer call. I don't know. But for your viewers who are not aware of it, for the last, I'd say, at least 8 years, maybe, I've been far more well known as a political figure than a cartoonist. And if you're not really following politics, you wouldn't know that a lot of people would put me in the top 20 of politically persuasive people. So we're in a season where
Just to mention, your book Win Bigly described why in early, I think it was in 2015 even, that you predicted even as early as then that Trump would win the nomination and quite possibly the general election in 2016. And you were one of the first people to predict it. Everybody thought you were crazy. You were right. You wrote the book Win Bigly about how Trump used basically hypnotism techniques that you recognize to win the presidency.
so thank you. That's perfect context. So if you understand me as a past Trump supporter, at the moment I'm endorsing Vivek Ramaswamy, but if you understand me in that context, and you understand that this is a season where players are being taken off the field by the other side as we get closer to a presidential election, then it makes a little more sense. But here's the reframe I was trying to set everybody up for. And it would have worked if my message had not gone viral, got outside my bubble. The reframe is this. If you're comparing the average of any two groups, you're in absurdity land. Now, it probably made sense historically. There was a time when that made perfect sense. At the moment, in 2013, even though systemic racism exists, I often argue with my audience. Some would like to say it doesn't, but obviously it does. And in my opinion, there's no way you can ignore it. But how do you deal with it? So here's the reframe. If you assume that you have to deal directly with the problem, you say the average of this group is different than the average of this group. Our goal is to have them the same. Well, we better take some stuff from this group and give it to this group, taxes or whatever you're going to do. So, but if you had a systems approach, you say, all right, maybe the cause is, what white people did in the past or systemic racism in the present, but what is the best way to fix it? And this is the reframe. The best way to fix it is on an individual basis, meaning since there are no average people, there's no average Black guy, there's no average Black woman, there's no average white guy or anything else. We're all infinitely different. And every person needs a different package of solutions or help or assets to get to the next level. So instead of telling me that you need me to worry about the average of any group, which has created a situation where it's actually dangerous to be white if you're around Black people who generally, with the help of white women, will try to get your stuff and transfer it so there's equity. You want to get out of that situation if you can, although there's no practical way to do that. But I wanted to make the point that the current approach is creating poison between relations of the races that doesn't need to be there. If you take it to an individual level and you say to me, Scott, there's a specific, young Black person who needs some help. I would say, well, what help do they need? Is it advice? Do they need to know how to reframe something? Is there a connection? Is there, can I mentor? Can I introduce you to somebody who has your solution? So if you take it down to an individual level, you have infinite resources that work. My book is just one of them. And my other book, How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, even more directly, is about ways an individual can make all of the obstacles of life, all of them, including systemic racism, be effectively eliminated. So they can still be there, but you can slice through it because you've worked on yourself. Your own tools are strong enough that you're like a hot knife through butter. So you can try to make the averages change, but what are you going to do about it that doesn't make things worse? That's what we're seeing. But if you say, how about every individual is infinitely different and they have available all the tools of success, but maybe they don't know it. And maybe there's some things we can provide. So I'm working on, also with Joshua Lysek, working on a student guide. So to take the things that are a little more adult oriented, like my book, and bring it into 30 lessons that you wish you knew when you were a teenager. Imagine learning systems over goals, talent stacks. Imagine learning that maybe you shouldn't follow your passion every time. Maybe that's optional. Imagine just learning the things that took me, 30 to 66 years to learn, but getting them when you're a teenager. How much is systemic racism going to bother you if I teach you that, hey, you're Black? Go to any one of these Fortune 500 companies. If you have the same skill set as the white people, you get hired every time. Not sometimes, not most of the time, every freaking time. So take your advantage, take your little stack of skills and go kill it. Now, because I don't have that advantage, if I go to that same job, I'm not going to be preferred. I know that. So instead, I will start a company. I'll do my own thing. And if that doesn't work, I'll start a second one. And if that doesn't work, I'll start a third one. But in the process of even failing, I'm going to be picking up skills. I'm going to be networking with people. I'll have thicker skin. So I've got my own path, and I'm not jealous of somebody else's path that's different. We both can succeed. We both have an open highway. It's just two different highways. Now, at some point, wouldn't it be great if it was one highway? Yes. You know how you get there? By each individual person doing the best they can and taking advantage of the best tools. That's how you get to the point where people stop asking about the average non-existent Black person and the average, imaginary white person. As long as we're on that frame of the imaginary people, can't get past it. Everything gets worse. And that's what we're witnessing. So the context that the news told you is that I'm a big old racist who doesn't like Black people. The real context is I'm one of the only people who has worked with Black Lives Matter to try to make their message a little cleaner, to see if there's anything Republicans can agree with. I thought body cams was a good thing. Back in the Black Lives Matter days, they were saying, hey, if we had body cams, that would help. And I thought, well, why don't I help? I'd love to help with that. That's a very specific thing. I think the cops should all have body cams, and maybe Republicans would help fund it. And then we could come together on that. But, then I found out that Black Lives Matter maybe had more of a political, financial, incentive. They weren't so much about problem solving.
And so
And then,
go ahead.
then let me add that my primary incentive for creating a workbook for kids is that the poorest kids have the most disadvantage. And specifically, I'm introducing this term. I think Black Americans have a glass ceiling that I call the imitation glass ceiling. And it's because of that narrative that there are oppressors and oppressed. How does any white person or Asian person, Indian American, Hispanic, how do they succeed? Same way everybody does. They look at successful people and they try to pick out the characteristics or the habits that make it work. And they say, well, I'll do that. Oh, it's the people who work hard. Okay, I'll do that. It's the people who went to school and built a bunch of skills. Okay, I'll do that. But now imagine you took me, magically you turned me into a Black American, and you teach me from birth that the oppressors are these ones who have all the good jobs. Do I imitate my oppressor? I don't think I do. So I think if you put me in that same situation and I were taught the same things, that I would say, let me do anything except act like my oppressors, because these guys are assholes. Like I just don't, I can't be like that. So then you've got to, you're cut off from the one thing that everybody else used to succeed, which is imitation. And so the workbook is for kids is a way to get past that, to say, look, here are the things everybody does. If you're not doing this list, there's nothing else that can work. This works for everybody. Everybody who doesn't do this list of good things, they don't get good outcomes. And I think we're done here. If you're interested, we can show you how to be on this list of successful people. So in my own mind, of course, it doesn't matter to the public. I'm directly, because of a great love for Black people in particular. I actually love Black people, which is weird to say. Like you, yeah,
Yeah, it almost sounds racist saying that.
it almost sounds racist to say it. But I learned long ago, or it's just a thought, that if you say, "Oh, I don't have a problem with black people," like that just doesn't really sound true, right? It just sounds like something you say, or I have a black friend. None of that sounds real. But if you can honestly say, I love black people, which I do, individually, I've never had any problem with anybody in person. Uh, then you can say, all right, I'm trying to help. I tried to help Black Lives Matter. I tried to help Colin Kaepernick. When Colin Kaepernick was being, destroyed by the right, my audience was mostly right-leaning people. And I defended him from the start. I said, do you not understand what a protest is? A protest is somebody making you mad because they inconvenienced you in this thing that you were just trying to enjoy your Sunday. That's what it was. It was a great protest. Now, you could argue about the things he's asking for, whether those are the right things to ask for. But as a protest, it's one of the best protests I've ever seen. Everybody knew about it. Everybody talked about it. Like things probably there are more police cams, body cams, because Colin Kaepernick existed, right? So, so I'm probably one of the best friends to the black community, except I don't want to say it that way because then I'm comparing the average black person that's not real to the average white person that's not real. And I'm trying to lose that frame. So I'm going to try as hard as I can to stick to the personal success habits and techniques that will have a disproportionate effect on Black Americans, good effect, because they don't have the imitation opportunity. But if they see it in, let's say their teacher presents it, maybe the teacher looks like them. Perfect. That's the perfect situation.
I also was thinking part of the context was this general concept that you were sort of making fun of the narrative that there's an average white person and an average black person. But you basically said, if someone hates me or if someone doesn't want to be around me or imitate me, I probably shouldn't want to be around them. Like it was probably best for me to not be around them. And you're basically saying how the media is portraying the average person. If that average person, some portion of them doesn't like you, probably safest for you not to be around them.
Right. Yeah. So literally nobody disagrees with the point when they hear it in its fullness, but when it just turns into a quick quote and then the news frames me. Once the news frames you, people don't really get out of that frame. Once you've been called something, that's who you are for the rest of your life.
Yeah. In part, it's because of the marketplace. Like take all the newspapers that dropped Dilbert. Obviously, a lot just like a lot of people who know Scott Adams as political commentator. A lot of people who just read Dilbert every day have no idea who Scott Adams is. They know Dilbert, they don't know Scott Adams.
Right.
So, but the marketplace, suddenly every editor of every newspaper was being told by a small portion of their readers, hey, you can't have Dilbert in your newspaper anymore, or you're going to lose business. And advertisers didn't want to advertise because they had a small portion of their interested consumers saying the same thing. And so that cost you, hundreds of newspapers where Dilbert was syndicated. Were you upset? I know you've said in other podcasts, hey, I feel as free as I ever do right now. But at that moment, were you like, what the hell is going on around here?
Yeah, I don't think anybody will ever believe me when I say this, but I swear to God, this is true. It was never unpleasant. And I can't explain it. I mean, every external objective factor, I should have been having a bad day, but it never happened. I just said, oh, here's a new set of things. I felt like I woke up in a new video game. And part of it is because it accidentally accomplished some things that I didn't know how to accomplish. Like it solved my biggest problem. My biggest problem was I couldn't figure out how to retire. And literally, because I was 65 and I was looking desperately for, I won't say desperately, but I was looking hard. It was my main focus career-wise is how do I, wind down and retire. Now I define retirement as still working, but only the stuff you want to do. So making a student guide that could make the world a better place. I'm not even thinking about the money. I mean, if I could give it away I had to talk Joshua into even selling it. I was like, well, we should just give it away for free. Right. So I'm totally not on the acquisition phase of my life. I'm in the, I just want to do things I like and, add something to the world. So once I got rid of the whole publishing world and the syndication world and the other partners who tell you what to do, I realized I could sell my comic on subscription. So it's available on the X platform. You just hit the subscribe button on my profile and you can see the comic there, but I've made it more spicy. So I couldn't do any controversial things. I couldn't use any even semi-naughty words, in a newspaper. But now I can do anything, and the subscribers, are expecting it to be edgy, so they're fine with it. It's also on the Locals platform. So on Locals, scottadams.locals.com, it's also a subscription. But I do also another comic called Robots Read News and a bunch of political stuff there. So a lot of live streaming. So I managed to go from a world that I was desperate to get out of into actually my ideal world, which is I have full creative control and it's not people who are complaining because they're signing up to see it.
Well, what about though, like, do you ever walk out of the house, someone recognizes you and like spits on you or anything like that?
Strangely enough, I had been so canceled just by being identified as a Trump supporter in 2016 that
They already thought you were crazy.
I'd already lost almost my entire social network. It was just, decimated by that. So it wasn't much of a difference at all socially. And I believe only one person that I know of actually said, maybe we shouldn't hang out. But only one. And, it didn't change my life. Let me tell you what does happen. I do a lot of work at Starbucks because I just like the atmosphere for work. And on a regular basis, maybe once a week, somebody approaches me at the table and usually bends down. It's often a man and says, excuse me, are you Scott Adams? And I won't know which way this is going yet. Like this could go terribly wrong. And I'll be, yeah. And then the person will say, big fans, glad, we've been following you forever. Keep up the good work. Yeah. Yeah. Don't worry about the cancellation. And then they go away like that. My experience is that I turned into a superstar in ways I've never experienced before. I mean, I've been famous for 25 years and people love Dilbert, but there's a level of appreciation for not letting the machine kill me, just surviving with a smile that people really respond to because everybody feels the machine is pressing them too. And when they see somebody who wasn't crushed, even though the machine took the best punch it could, I took the best punch they had. I mean, you can't get a better punch than having your entire business eliminated, your legacy erased, and being labeled as the biggest racist in the country. Now that's complete. Swear to God, it didn't bother me much. I never had a bad day.
It's so interesting because again, I mean, I've seen all the discussions and as while preparing for this, and it really did seem like everything was taken out of context, and it's just a shame. And look, you see it with a lot of people, but then it's like a lottery, like who gets picked to be canceled? Because look, and I don't even have the I don't have the mindset where I care, even if it was aimed at me. Like I'm Jewish, I have a lot of Jewish friends. Everyone's so upset at Kanye West and Ice Cube, for saying certain comments about Jews or implying certain things, perhaps about Jews. And yet for me, these are two of the most talented people in history, the history of music, particularly. I love that music. And I would love to have them on the podcast, for instance, and whatever. Like, I literally just don't care whatever it is they believe or say about Jews. Like, it just doesn't matter to me. And it's funny how many people just care about, again, things that were taken out of context, things that you don't really understand, what's really happening. And they instantly ignore everything else except this one thing that has blossomed out of nothing, literally nothing. And then they run their whole life based on that, on so many different issues.
Well, let's take the Ye example. Do you think there's any chance that if you were in the room with Ye, he would treat you like a Jewish guy versus just a person. Right.
No,
Yeah,
zero
right.
chance.
Zero chance. Right. We don't act when we meet people, we do treat them as individuals. And then we act as if when we walk out the door and get on social media, we act like all that mattered was the magic average person of the group. So Ye said some things, of course, I don't endorse, but he was talking about some kind of group effect that I don't think is real, but that's not for me to argue at the moment. Um, but he's not going to take that into the room. Like, I don't think that affects who he's talking to at any moment. I would imagine he
Yeah.
treats them individually.
Yeah, and I could jump on the bandwagon that says, "Oh, that's a problem with social media," but of course, there's a lot of great things about social media. It's how we met, for instance, and how a lot of people meet. It's social, but it's also media, and media has probably more downsides than being social. But all right, thanks for shedding some light on that. And again, Scott, thanks. This book, Reframe Your Brain, blows me away because it puts into a systematized format so many things that I've done personally in my life, and has kind of given me the tools and powers to do it in other areas of my life, or at least reminds me how successful this reframing has been, because it puts it into, again, one system. And I like that. And I appreciate it. It's a great book, great stories, as always. Oh, so you like Vivek Ramaswamy? Who do you think is going to actually win the election? I might as well get your prediction so I can start betting now.
This was a tough one because when I predicted Trump, it was because I saw yet a set of persuasion tools that other people didn't recognize. So I had like a hidden variable that I could see. But in this election, you've got way other variables that are invisible. Number one is Joe Biden even going to be physically able to speak, by election day? And I would say there's some chance not. I mean, he might actually be connected to tubes and, we never see him again 2 months from now, the way it's looking anyway. And then Trump, who knows what's going to happen with all the lawfare, attacks? Will any of them be successful? Does it affect the vote? But I like to use the best movie reframe. Like, what would be the best movie, the most entertaining outcome? Elon Musk uses this frame all the time. That the reality tends to follow the most entertaining path to the observer, but not to the people who are in it, because it might be all bad for them. So if we take the movie idea, Trump hit his third act, the point in the movie where the hero is in so much trouble, you can't even imagine how they could get out of this trouble. Well, that was January 6th. All right. Nobody could recover from January 6th because it was framed as an insurrection. Half of the country believes that the other half tried to overthrow the country by sauntering around in a building for a few hours and doing some paperworky things that the Supreme Court would have thrown away immediately if it ever come to that. But they believe it happened. So if you count that as his third act, what would be the best movie script for how he redeems himself if that's what's the most entertaining? And I hate to say it, but there's one thing that's just screaming for reality to manifest that in nothing, and that is proofs that the election was rigged. Now, hold on, let me be very careful. I'm aware of no evidence that would support the theory that the election was rigged. I'm aware of no evidence. However, we do live in a world in which every other of our respected institutions has been proven to be corrupt. Everything from the FBI to the CIA to the media to basically the whole thing. It's all corrupt. But we're asked to believe that despite everything being corrupt, the elections are the one exception, and not just one, but all 50 states individually doing elections were all clean and pure. And not only that, but every precinct within those states was clean and pure, unlike 100% of the things that are in every other domain, from finance to you name it. So, is it possible that something could come out that we had not seen yet that would prove Trump right? I don't know. I wouldn't bet on it. But if you want to know what the most entertaining movie is, by far, it would be some new revelation that the election was in fact rigged.
But the interesting thing is, in order for it to be big enough to somehow get the attention of media, since the media has the narrative that there is no rigging, correctly or incorrectly, it would have to be really big facts that we couldn't ignore. Because while Trump was president, and the same thing's happening in reverse, but while Trump was president, every single day people would tell me, "Oh my gosh, they're going to release the smoking gun on Monday or tomorrow or whatever, and then he's going to be gone. He's going to be put in jail and gone for good." And then the same thing's happening now. Like every day, oh, they're going to finally release this big thing from Hunter Biden's laptop, and Joe Biden's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. And after the election, people were saying the same thing. Tomorrow, the Secretary of State of this state is going to finally whistleblow, and we're going to see what really happened. It never, ever happens. None of the things anybody's ever said about these things have ever happened. So that's why I tend to believe whenever anyone tells me, oh, it's about to come out now about X, Y, and Z, I know it's never going to come out. So I sort of feel like that movie won't happen.
Well, when it was first alleged that there might have been some impropriety, I warned my audience often and loudly that even if someday we found something wrong with any part of the election, you could guarantee that 95% of the claims would be bullshit no matter what. So whether or not there was anything real, 95% of the claims would be unreal for sure. UFOs are the same thing, right? If we ever found a real one, it doesn't change the fact that 99% of them were bullshit. So anything's possible. Anything's possible.
Like it reminds me of like JFK Nixon. There's pretty much a lot of evidence now that in the 1960 election there was some rigging, most notably in Chicago. I mean, it's. I don't even know if the Kennedys deny it anymore. Like there's just lots been written about it, a lot's been discussed. Nixon was actually suing for 10 months after the election. He kind of kept it quiet. He didn't make a big deal out of it, and eventually he just gave up because there was no point, and he didn't want to cause too much problems. But again, like it's not like this is the first time there's been election rigging. 1876, you had James Blaine and the guy who actually did become president. That whole thing was rigged. So again, I don't know. Even if we find something out, nothing will, like you say, nothing will happen.
Well,
so I wonder if that is actually the most entertaining solution.
Let me add another little conspiracy theory to the mix. Have you been curious why the Republicans, who are so adamant that the election was not good, have not done more to fix it? Does that seem curious to you? Because I have a theory for that, and the theory is that the Republicans are cheating in their states, and they can't afford the lid to be taken off because it's dirty all the way. That's a possibility.
Yeah, that could be true. I also think just Trump was really not a Republican, and Republicans and Democrats just don't like Trump. Like both parties don't like him. So
yeah,
and I think the Republicans were hoping kind of a Trump-like, officious sort of Republican like Ron DeSantis, who was one of them, would win. But now it's looking like obviously the early stories are not the most entertaining winners. So like, again, that could affect Ramaswamy. He might have been entertaining if he broke out in the convention, but he's breaking out a little too early, which spoils the movie theory a little bit.
Well, I love having Vivek in the mix because if they take Trump out, they get the Hulk. Because the thing they don't see coming is if you had Trump's policies and you also had a strong personality, but you had Vivek's communication skills, where he can take the pain out of the communication. Yeah, Trump says things that make your hair set on fire, both positive and negative. Where Vivek tries to find that middle where it's hard to argue. It's like, okay, I'll give you that. So if they lose Trump, they're going to get somebody who can give you Trump policies without as much friction. There'd be less resistance to a Vivek than there would be to a Trump because Trump's created his own baggage there. So I don't know. I think he's like a plan. He's almost like Harris is the thing that keeps Biden in office because you don't want that as your backup. Right. You don't want the backup plan.
Right. you know what strikes me as an interesting narrative in terms of this movie theory, like what would be the best movie? And this is not a political belief at all, but like RFK Jr. is interesting from a movie theory standpoint because the last two times there was a one-term president or a president who in his first term had a primary challenger, as far as I know, were 1980, where Jimmy Carter was in his first term and Ted Kennedy was the challenger, and 1968, where LBJ was in his arguably first term, and Robert F. Kennedy was the main candidate until he was assassinated. And so it was interesting. It's interesting to me. There's like that little historical narrative of Kennedy's connected to one-term presidents. So that feels a little movie-ish to me. But yeah, it's going to be interesting no matter what.
I'll tell you by a personal anecdote that makes me feel like I live in a simulation. A lot of people don't know that RFK Jr.'s voice problems, it's got a name, it's called spasmodic dysphonia. And I had the same thing for years. And as you can tell, I don't talk the way he talks now. I had a surgery to fix it. But
Spasmodic dysphonia.
yeah,
You had the surgery.
so people kept saying, "Hey, why don't you tell him what you did so he can fix his voice?" So I did reach out and I tweeted about it and stuff. And he later contacted me and told me that I did inspire him to seek treatment. Now he did a different treatment, one that has a faster recovery, but I don't think he could run for president without the at least 30% improvement, I think, from his procedure. So I ended up having some tiny little connection to that story.
That's interesting. It's so weird how it's all connected. Like, with Robert F. Kennedy and marrying the actress who played Larry David's wife on Curb Your Enthusiasm, when his wife in real life left him for Al Gore. Like,
Wait,
just too many
did
wild.
that happen? Al
Yeah.
Gore is with his ex?
Yeah,
I didn't even know that. Oh, wow.
yeah, yeah. She was a big environmentalist, and ultimately spending a lot of time on the private jet, flying around to environmental conferences with Al Gore. They became an item, and he left Tipper Gore, and she left Larry David. And just like on the show, the Cheryl Hines character also left Larry David. And in reality, Cheryl Hines,
Oh, wow.
is RFK Jr.'s third wife. So,
And
uh,
and just to complete it, I've been compared to Larry David so many times that he's been my Halloween costume more than once. So
you're kidding. That's funny. But he probably would never give you a call, though,
I don't think so.
because you've been canceled.
Yeah.
But anyway, Scott, thank you so much once again for coming on the show. The books Reframe Your Brain. You can't buy it in the bookstore, right? Where can you buy it?
Oh, you can now. It's available in Barnes and Noble, and Amazon has all the forms of it, and a bunch of other places. But look for it online. Online's your best bet.
All right, great. Well, thanks a lot, Scott, and thanks for going over all this stuff that's been going on with you, and I appreciate it. And you're always welcome on the podcast. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I appreciate it.